Hello and welcome back to Inside the Tank. I'm your host, Tyler Rains. We have a lot to talk about as per usual on the show today. The good, the bad, and the ugly, but mostly the good. So let's break into it. Join me for this episode today as we break down the Steelheads weekend games, their upcoming triple header again, and much more on this show. Welcome back. Okay, so now usually I'm here kind of spewing my nonsense over the last couple of weeks, and I feel kind of bad that I was bashing these guys last week, but rightfully so. They weren't playing that great, and you needed a kickstart. So with that being said, they got that kickstart, but it wasn't until Sunday. There were a couple of games that, they played good. They didn't necessarily play the best in the Wednesday game. They definitely didn't play great on Friday night, but Sunday afternoon they came home and they changed the narrative of every game that they played this week. Very proud of these guys in the way that they played. They faced a lot of challenges in this Sunday game, which we are going to probably talk about the most in this episode. But that was it was incredible. And we're going to actually have Cameron Reesor, who is my co-host for the Pro Shot Hockey Show, coming on and joining us this episode as well to talk about the game. Him and I were watching it together. So this is going to be a really fun one. I want to start off with the game against Sarnia. And that was a pretty incredible one, to say the least, and not in a good way, because they ended up losing that game 6-2. The only two players that got a goal in that game were Del Bell and Beck, and neither one of them were on the power play. It was both even strength. They were both scored in the second period, and majority of that game, Bellieri was left out to dry. It didn't matter what play it was. The defense just didn't get back quick enough. They were out of position. They were taking too many penalties. Though there was only one penalty in this game that cost them, they were just, again, I've repeated this over and over and over again. They need to stay out of the box. They didn't do that this game. They ended up losing the game 6-2. So they come back Friday night, facing off against the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, which, by the way, they were 0-7-1. Or I think they were 0-7 going into today. They were on a 7-game losing streak. Thinking, easy win, right? Should be good. Shouldn't be too bad. They came in and just absolutely walked all over the Steelheads. And when I say walked all over them, I meant the first period was good. Everything else was just not. Because it looked like there were going to be a bunch of high danger chances for the Steelheads to get in and break past the Greyhounds defense. And they just didn't do that. We're used to seeing them outplay their opponents, outshoot them, outscore them at times. And they just didn't do that. They just did not have a lead. They came out, they were looking okay in the first 10 minutes, and then they just went downhill from there. It was basically scoreless through the first period. And then the second period, Greyhounds came in, scored 2 goals, and then the last 2 goals were just empty netters when they were trying to come back. So it wasn't great. Playing in Sarnia on Wednesday wasn't great at all. Playing Sault Ste. Marie at home on Friday. And, of course, they had a game on Sunday, which was today. And that was a lot better. I will hands down say that this was probably the best game that they played all weekend. What can I tell you? I mean, there's not a whole lot of... How do I say this? There's not a whole lot of really good things to talk about in the first 2 games, which is why I'm not going to focus on those as much. And I'm really going to focus on this game that happened today because it was a lot better and it just looked a lot more appetizing in a way. So with that being said, I'm going to bring Cameron Reesor onto the show and we're going to dissect this game together. And now we welcome to the show Cameron Reesor. So, buddy, first off, thanks for joining me today because I know it was a little bit short notice, but you and I were watching the game together this afternoon, and I have to say, out of the 3 games that they played this week, this one was the best.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And you could literally see them getting that momentum back that they once had, like at the start of the season, and losing that 4-game, what was it, 4-game losing streak?
Yeah, it was a 4-game losing streak, yeah.
Yeah, it was 4-game losing streak. And they were down like 3-1 in the second period. After the second period, and I don't know what JR said in the locker room, but my goodness, they looked absolutely incredible in the third.
It worked. Whatever was said in the locker room, I don't know if it was Jeff Katakis that was giving him a pep talk or if it was JR, but whatever was said in that locker room after the second period of this game completely turned them around. So the first period, they didn't look that great. They looked sloppy. They weren't starting on time, taking a lot of penalties. And as you saw, we're going to talk about the refereeing, but and I don't want to be one of those people that complains about, hey, the refs were bad, but when they're not good, we're going to let you know that they're not good. And today was one of those games. So they didn't look great in the first period. They were really sloppy, weren't getting out there a whole lot. Second period, same thing. And as we mentioned, they were down at 1.3-1. So as the game got better, they started to play a lot better. You saw Charlie Callahan out there getting involved in the plays. Ethan Del Mastro was just absolutely firing on all cylinders. Just, you pick an area on the ice, he was there clogging it up, trying to prevent those Kingston players from getting in. There were a couple of chances. I think Chaz Sharp blocked a few shots from Francesco Arcuri before he scored, which I thought was pretty awesome. I mean, you're so used to seeing Chaz Sharp, especially over the last couple of games. He hasn't been himself in the sense that, he's not out there blocking as many shots. He's not out there making as many plays as he probably should. And he's not being the power play quarterback that he once was. Now that he's, I guess, kind of found that, it's refreshing to see. So,
absolutely.
Given the fact that this game was riddled with penalty minutes, they came out and just said, you know what? We're down in this game. Enough's enough. We got to do this. We got to come back, and we got to prove that, you know what, we're still here. And they did. 4-game losing streak's over. They decided we're not going to let this happen anymore. They came back, and they just proved everybody wrong.
Absolutely, they did.
Now, I wanted to ask you, given the fact that, we watched the full game, start to finish, tech issues and all, what were your impressions from the minute the puck dropped in the first period until the minute that the buzzer went at the end of the game? Just what did you think?
Chaos. It was chaos. It was like one of those chaotic games, and it just went all over the place. It was, what's the wording here, I guess? Like, emotional roller coaster. It was one of those emotional roller coaster games where it's just like, you're like, oh, they're losing again. And then they're like, yeah, they're winning. And then they're like, oh, they're losing. And it was just like one of those games.
Oh, and I agree. And I mean, I remember at one point, I was ready to just say, you know what? They're not winning this game. And again, serves me right. I shouldn't give up on these guys, and I never really have.
I can vouch for him on this. He was literally saying, like, after the second period,
we're done for.
He was going to literally start recording the episode.
Yeah, I was at this point. I was so frustrated, and I was just like, you know what? There's no point in keeping this going. I should just record now.
There's just no point.
But again, these guys proved me wrong every single time. Because the expectation is that they were going to go into this game and they probably weren't going to win because Kingston has been red hot recently. But they did. They went in. They didn't just win. They threw everything they had, every little bit of heart that they had left into that third period. And you love to see that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because
they did.
With a team that hasn't been... how do I say, hasn't been the hardiest, I guess. They haven't shown a whole lot of guts through this season. And I think that they did that in this game. That was a picture perfect game.
Oh, it was. Absolutely it was. No question. Probably one of their honestly better games of the season for like just third period wise, obviously.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they basically, I hate to use hey, they blew a 3-1 lead, but Kingston did, and they took full advantage of that. It felt like they just came out third period. They were just a brand new team. Now, I want to get to the elephant in the room here. The reason why they were losing here, the reason why they weren't playing that great in the first couple periods wasn't just because that they weren't playing great. And again, this is, I don't know how many times I've had to call out the refereeing on this show, but it was god awful. I'm not going to obviously mention names, but the refereeing was god awful in this game. There were so many.
Probably the worst refereeing I've seen in like all my years of watching hockey. It was absolutely abysmal.
Yeah,
absolutely abysmal.
Like, see, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because there were so many points in the game where I'm just like, this should have been called. This should have been called. They called Ethan Del Mastro after he was hit from behind, and they called that embellishment.
Yeah.
As if he had time to dive right after he was hit.
And obviously, I want to point out, obviously, I don't think you mentioned it, but the main thing here, like the main thing that caused this whole game to be absolutely chaotic was actually not even like in the mid moments of the game, but it was actually at the start of the game.
Yes, and what he's referring to,
Vecchia. Yes.
Yeah, so it was this is going to get reviewed by the league for sure. I mean, after watching that hit back, there is probably going to be some sort of discipline on it. I would guess probably a few games that he's going to be suspended. But if you haven't seen the hit, I'm sure someone's probably posted it on Twitter or on Instagram or somewhere. Yeah, there was.
I'm gonna describe it here. So, Linus Hemstrom got the puck from a receiving pass, and Xander Vecchia he took must have been 6 strides or something, and he just hammered Hemstrom into the boards. He hammered him right from behind. It was wasn't it? It's like a check to the head from behind.
It looked like it. I wasn't exactly sure from that angle, but it looked like a check to the head for sure. And
it did not look good.
Ended up getting 5 in a game for that one. The Greyhounds scored on the power play, obviously, and that's what really killed them in the beginning.
The Kingston Frontenacs.
That was
Greyhounds.
I immediately. Yeah, no, you're right. I had to catch myself there. I immediately thought, this is it. This is where we lose the game. And they didn't. They somehow just decided to say, we got this. Don't worry. So there was a lot of good in this game. There were some ugly moments. There weren't a whole lot of bad moments, which was good. And they managed to pull out the win.
The main part was the refereeing. It was absolutely god-awful.
It was... There weren't many games that I've seen that have the worst officiating I think I've ever seen, but I think this is a top 5 of,
this was bad.
And it was bad from both sides. There were calls that we should have got, there were calls that they should have got, there were ones that I think shouldn't have been called at all, but that's just officiating's a hard job, you know what I mean? Because
the main thing is that the Steelheads won, and JR must have lit a fire under their butts. And
for sure. That's the only thing I can really think of is that whatever was said in the locker room, it clearly worked. So I'm happy they got the win. Yeah. They have another 3-3 coming up, another triple header, which I think that's just, again, it's crazy. I think they've played 5 triple headers already this season, which is pretty nuts. Sunday's their teddy bear toss game. And that's going to be a really fun one. So bring your teddy bears down to the game. It's a tradition that has lived for a long time in hockey. Bring your bears down to the game. First player for the Steelheads who scores, throw him on the ice. You know how it goes. But they have a lot to deal with next weekend. As I mentioned, it's the triple header. And if I remember correctly, I think they're opening it up with Hamilton. Yeah, so it's Hamilton at home on Friday. They're in Erie on Saturday, and then they're back for the Teddy Bear Toss game on Sunday. So I wanted to, before we wrap up, what do they have to do in order to win these next 3 games?
They need to stay calm. They can't be taking penalties. They need to get the offense going. That's number one. And the defense needs to be shut down, because for like the first parts of that game that we watched today, like the first and second period, that defense, boy,
it was
absolutely atrocious.
They left Leanders out to dry, I think, for that first and second goal. And it was like I said in the first part of the episode.
Leanders is the MVP of this hockey game.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
He was incredible.
100%. I don't disagree with you whatsoever. What was I going to say? There were a couple of instances where they did leave Leanders out to dry. Same thing on Friday night. And they left Bellieri out to dry plenty of times on Wednesday. But they managed to pick up their scraps and use whatever they had left and just say, you know what? We can't be doing this all the time. We need to step up and we need to block some shots. We need to break up some plays before they get to the goalie. There were so many instances in this game where I'm just like, you know what? In the first period, played like garbage. And then I'm just like, is this the same team? Is this the same team that was playing? Because they completely did a 180, turned it all around. So I think prediction for next weekend, I think we're going to go 2-1-1. Or 2-0-1. I think there's going to be an overtime or a shootout loss in there. I hate betting against the team, but I think it's probably going to go in against Hamilton. Hamilton always has a tough time. They always play us pretty hard. So I think we're going to go next week 2-0-1, and I think it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a good weekend for games. So this one was a little bit of a short one, probably about 17 minutes long. Not too bad. But regardless, they got to win. The losing streak's over. It's time to celebrate. Steelheads fans, feel good about this one because it may have been a messy win, but the streak is over. The losing streak is over. It's time to start a new one. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Inside the Tank. Cameron Reesor, thank you very much again for coming on and talking about the game today. It's like I said, I know it was pretty short notice, but it was pretty awesome to get the chance to chat once again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Now, if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell notification for all future content, and we will see you next weekend when the Steelheads roll in and finish their triple header. We will talk to you then.